Parasite, a South Korean movie, written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, was released in the year 2019. The story unfolds in a modern-day depiction of South Korea's society, where the life of a poor family is introduced to the viewer. Trying to make ends meet, the son one day successfully manages in getting hired as an English tutor by a rich family. He deceives them into believing he is a highly qualified worker. Seeing this as an opportunity, the poor family elaborates a scheme which allows them to one by one all follow suit in becoming hired. Just as they succeed, things start going south in an unexpected turn of events. The difference between rich and poor represented in Parasite is impactful, as economic inequality is one of the major contemporary issues of this day. Showing the enormous but realistic contrast between these two social classes draws the audience's attention to the problems that come with capitalistic societies very effectively. Further highlighting the film's impact are the underlying binary oppositions that exaggerate the representation of the families and of South Korea's economy and its victims. All things considered, the director Bong Joon-ho intends to expose how the problem of social class inequality is in fact not based on the people within the social classes, but rather on the system capitalism itself. Representation refers to how reality is portrayed in a media product. It is never just like reality, even if it seems that way at first because of the constant representation of certain ideas. Representation gives insight into the maker's agenda and the effect they want their product to have. Every media product's representation also features underlying ideologies. Ideology is about subjective and incomplete ideas about reality. It is about how these ideas create powerful value and can become natural in our own social world. Therefore, trying to understand how ideology impacts the representation in media products is very interesting. Parasite plays in South Korea, where Asia's fourth largest economy can be found. One of the film's most basic underlying ideologies is about capitalism. The country's economic system is based on competition within a free market and individuals aspiring to gain capital. Due to little economy growth, South Korea faces a deepening of economic inequality in their society. Especially the younger generation suffer greatly from a worsening job market and a more competitive educational system. In Parasite, this is represented by the Kim family being jobless and not being able to afford education for their children. The Kim's son turns to the forging of university enrollment documents, and the other family members follow in making sure to fake credibility too. Bong mentions how Korea on the surface seems like a very rich and glamorous country now, with K-pop, high-speed internet and IT technology. However, what is hidden from the spotlight is the ever-so-growing social disparity between the classes, portraying the families of opposite ends as humble and mutually respecting one another despite the differences. It refers to capitalism itself being at fault. Bong does not blame the people within the social classes on one end or the other. The audience instead is invited to have an understanding for both families. Parasite's storyline is based in South Korea's capital, Seoul. Within Seoul, there is a distinguishable separation of social class depending on the neighborhood in which one resides. The easiest distinction lies in how high up the residency is located ground-wise, as rich neighborhoods are situated in high-up areas of the city. This is represented in the living situation of the characters in Parasite. The Kims live in a semi-basement apartment in a low neighborhood. Semi-basement apartments can be found a lot these days in the regions surrounding the capital. Known to be cramped, dimly lit, but cheap, they are mostly occupied by the lower class. With it comes social stigma, as people living in semi-basements are looked down upon. The Parks, on the other hand, live in a spacious, minimalistic, and luxurious house situated in a very high, rich neighborhood. In Seongbok-dong, the neighborhood shown in the movie, the streets are known to be spacious, tidy, and quiet. In the movie, these elements are shown in the Park's lifestyle, confirming their richness. To further increase the distinctions and get the content creator's ideology across, stereotypes are used. Stereotypes are constructed imaginations one has of specific groups of people. The problem with stereotypes is a lack of diversity. Minorities can be left out or portrayed unfairly since stereotypes often cause a negative judgment-rooted representation in media. They are used for audiences to make sense of characters and situations more quickly. One can see that the Parks fit this description to some extent. They dress well, have a luxurious home with expensive goods, private tutors for their children, and are oblivious to the lower class. However, this friendliness and naiveness does not portray the usual rich behavior one expects. Poor people are believed to be lazy, unintelligent, and less eager to work. There are assumptions, them being drug abusers and poor communicators. The Kim's home, as well as their appearance, matches the lower class. They wear old clothes, bad haircuts, and live in a poor neighborhood. However, the stereotypes mentioned before do not apply to the Kims. Instead, they are clever, cunning communicators and eager to improve their position. The representation and ideology in Parasite are supported by Levi Strauss's theory of binary oppositions. It shows two extremes of a theme and argues that one is usually less valued than its opposite. Binary oppositions show contrast and is a powerful device in Parasite. The main binary opposition in the movie is a contrast between the rich and the poor. This is shown in the way how the two families, the Kims and the Parks, dress and their homes look like. By showcasing the contrast of the two extremes, one has a more impactful impression of the wide gap between rich and poor. Furthermore, the effect of economic inequality is recognizable through the binary opposition of parasite and host. Throughout the movie, both families are a parasite and a host. By infiltrating the Park family, the Kim family are parasites. But since the Parks rely on service workers for their lifestyle, they seem to be parasitic towards the Kims and other social classes. Including the parasite-host opposition makes the intention and the critique of the system much more powerful. A movie that can be compared to Parasite in its ideology and binary oppositions is the Hunger Games Mockingjay movie. Set in a dystopian world, the capital of Panem rules 12 districts. Annually, a boy and a girl from each district are forced to compete in the Hunger Games, where the participants fight each other to the death until only one participant remains. Katniss Everdeen, a girl from District 12, volunteers to participate as tribute in the 74th Hunger Games, after her younger sister was originally chosen. Together with her male counterpart, Peter Malark, the two are brought to the capital to train and compete in the Hunger Games. When comparing the ideology of Parasite with the Hunger Games, there are similar representations of rich and poor at play. The rich in the Hunger Games are oblivious, selfish, and wasteful, fulfilling the stereotypes of rich people. In contrast to Parasite, they treat the poor badly and are actually portrayed as evil. They do not acknowledge tributes as human and just enjoy the games. The poor in District 12, on the other hand, are portrayed more drastic as being starving and having no hope left. They are more directly controlled and punished due to the system being a dictatorship. Compared to Parasite, the Hunger Games use a more stereotypical representation of rich and poor people's characteristics. The living conditions in both media products are similar. The rich have spacious, secluded and luxurious homes in nice areas, whereas the poor are left in shabby and rock-down living conditions. The gaps between both ends of the social classes is widening in both media products. Likewise to each other, the rich are oblivious to the poor and gain from their suffering. Even though the films differ in their economic structure, both dictatorship and capitalism cause the same problems of economic inequality, and both media products criticize the system. The districts going from number 1 to number 12 portray a middle ground in the Hunger Games, whereas Parasite does not represent the middle class. The districts are forced to fight each other to the point of death in the games. To escape their poor situation, they could fight together against the shared enemy, the capital and its dictator. The same can be seen in Parasite, as the two poor families fight each other to the point of death, hoping to gain a better social position. They have no sympathy for each other. Neither do they recognize each other as having the same problems or seeing an advantage in joining forces to fight against something bigger. Even though The Hunger Games is more tailored to an American audience and Parasite to a South Korean audience, They both are very relevant and widely acknowledged internationally, as many countries suffer from economic inequality today. While the Hunger Games include a representation of the middle ground of society, Parasite still manages to construct a more realistic representation. Contrarily to the Hunger Games, all characters in Parasite have both good and bad characteristics and are all portrayed as victims of the problems caused by capitalism. When comparing binary oppositions of both movies with one another, the binary opposition rich and poor can be seen as a similar theme in both Parasite and The Hunger Games. Putting the rich and the poor in contrast shows how privileged, unaware, and delusional the rich are, and how difficult it is for the poor. In Parasite, the subjects of Parasite and host can be compared with tributes and the game makers in The Hunger Games. The game makers whose job are to plan and control the Hunger Games are perpetrators, as they are responsible for how the tributes die in the arena. In Parasite, both rich and poor are parasitic towards one another as they rely on each other to get by. Both these roles are therefore interchangeable. What makes it different from the Hunger Games is that the families are not seen as perpetrators but as victims. In Parasite, the political system is at fault for the forcibly parasitic relationship towards one another. Featuring the same themes and problems, both Parasite and The Hunger Games' ideologies are against the widening gap of economic inequality. The representation in Parasite is done more impactfully, as it is very realistic and relatable, therefore making the movie a very honest and inspiring critique. Not blaming one or the other is a true strength of Parasite. Rather than making the rich seem unsympathetic, Parasite blames the system instead. Where other films like The Hunger Games drift off onto good and evil, Parasite's realistic representation makes the film a truly rare and powerful media product whose questions aren't answered lightly. The binary oppositions reinforce the representation in both media products. In Parasite, they are more intense, playing a bigger role in the movie. They also underline the system's fault by making the opposition between a parasite and host change between characters. Bong Joon-ho doesn't just tell a story. He cleverly pours his message into every device and detail in Parasite. The combination of representation and binary oppositions are both very impactful ways of achieving this. There is always more than one answer when asking who is at fault. Both sides of the coin show the symptoms of capitalism beautifully put into contrast.